Maya Patel had been working maintenance on military aircraft for 5 years now, 6 days a week without fail. The modified SH-60 Seahawk beneath her hands responded like an old friend, complex, reliable, and utterly dependable in ways the newer drones could never match. She'd spent 3 years maintaining this particular helicopter, tail number CS-2187, working night shifts in the hangar after her regular day duties on the carrier deck. The morning sun painted the Arabian Sea in shades of silver and blue as Maya finished her final pre-flight inspection, making sure every system was operating at peak performance. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. She wasn't supposed to be thinking about anything but the maintenance checklist, but her mind kept drifting to the conversation she'd had with her commanding officer the night before. "You know, pilots never notice the work you do, Commander," Wilson had said, voice tight with old frustration. "They say some maintenance crews care too much about the machines and not enough about the mission." Maya had laughed it off, but standing in the hangar now, surrounded by the complex systems and worn components her hands had touched thousands of times, she understood what he'd meant. Every wire, every bearing seemed to whisper stories the pilots never bothered to hear. The hangar intercom crackled to life, jolting her back to the present. All maintenance personnel, complete final checks. Flight operations beginning in 30 minutes. Maya blinked, checking her digital tablet. She was ahead of schedule, as usual. The Seahawk was ready to fly, though it wasn't scheduled for today's operations. It was a backup aircraft, kept ready but rarely used anymore. "Maintenance Chief Patel," came a voice from behind her. Lieutenant Commander Jackson approached, his flight suit crisp and his expression stern. "Is there a reason you're still working on an aircraft that isn't on today's flight roster?" "Sir, CS-2187 is always kept at ready status per Admiral Reeves." "Standing orders," Maya responded, voice steady. "I'm completing the weekly deep systems check now." The pause that followed felt longer than it should have. When Jackson spoke again, his tone was different, colder, more official. "Well, that's about to change. CS-2187 is being decommissioned next month. The new MH-6 ORS are taking over all search and rescue operations. Your old bird is officially obsolete." Maya's hands tightened slightly on her tablet. She knew this day would come eventually, but she had hoped for at least another year. The Seahawk had modifications and capabilities the newer models couldn't match, especially for difficult extraction missions in rough seas or bad weather. But arguing with a pilot about aircraft specifications rarely ended well for maintenance personnel. "Sir, with respect, CS-2187 has specialized stabilization systems and enhanced rotor performance that make it uniquely suited for gathering dust," Jackson interrupted with a dismissive wave. "The brass has made their decision. We need standardized equipment, not custom jobs that only one maintenance chief knows how to fix." 2 junior officers appeared at Jackson's side, both wearing the distinctive patches of the new helicopter training program, the lead pilots. Voice carried across the hangar, young and dismissive. "Ma'am, you babysitting that old bird on purpose? This your first time seeing equipment get phased out, or just feeling sentimental?" His companion chimed in with barely concealed laughter. "Somebody get the museum crew on standby. This relic's about to get a nice display case somewhere in Pensacola." Maya didn't respond. There was no point. She'd heard it all before. Every joke about the older aircraft, every comment about wasting time on legacy systems. Let them laugh. The Seahawk had been proving doubters wrong for decades. Visual inspection confirms it's not even up to current spec, the first pilot continued, his tone shifting to routine professionalism. "Old frame, custom modifications, probably can't even interface with the new mission systems. Copy that. Treat as low priority equipment." "We'll process the decommission paperwork when we get back," Jackson said, turning away. Maya watched them walk toward the newer helicopters, their polished flight helmets gleaming under the hangar. Lights, the contrast was almost comical. Their aircraft bore factory-fresh paint and standardized components, while CS-2187 showed the subtle signs of continuous improvement and adaptation that told the story of every mission it had completed. "Nice paint job on the tail, Chief," called back one of the pilots, slightly mocking. "Can't tell if it's regulation or just meant to look official. That's some kind of maintenance code." Still, Maya said nothing. The silence seemed to unsettle them more than any defense would have. She adjusted her position slightly, continuing her systems check with characteristic thoroughness, and let them walk away. The Seahawk waited patiently, its systems humming with the quiet efficiency that came from years of meticulous care. What none of them knew, what Maya herself was only beginning to understand, was that the tail number stenciled and faded blue above the rear stabilizer was about to change everything. CS-2187 wasn't just a random sequence of digits. It was a designation that had been quietly serving for 15 years, waiting for the right moment to prove its worth again. In the carrier's Combat Information Center, a young communications specialist was frowning at her screen. A priority transmission had appeared where there should have been routine traffic, a signal she'd never seen before transmitted through an emergency channel she didn't recognize. The helicopter's identification transponder was responding to something buried deep in the Navy's database, something that made the system flag the aircraft not as obsolete, but as something else entirely. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The specialist called for her supervisor, pointing at the anomaly. Within minutes, the alert would work its way up the chain of command, reaching people who remembered what that tail number meant, people who had been waiting for years for a moment they hoped would never come. But for now, Maya worked on. Surrounded by officers who had no idea they were about to need the very aircraft they had just mocked. The silence in the hangar stretched longer than it should have. Maya could feel the tension building as flight operations began around her. The carrier's massive elevators were lifting aircraft to the flight deck, and pilots were conducting their final briefings. Something felt off about today's energy, more urgent than usual, with officers moving with barely contained purpose. Below them, the Arabian Sea had turned choppy with unexpected weather patterns that weren't in this morning's forecast. Maya recognized the conditions from previous deployments, rapidly deteriorating visibility and high winds that could complicate flight operations, especially for the newer pilots who hadn't experienced the region's notoriously unpredictable weather. "Maintenance Chief Patel," came a voice over her comm unit. It was Operations Officer Lieutenant Commander Vasquez. "Report to the CIC immediately." Maya secured her tools, gave CS-2187 final visual inspection, and made her way through the carrier's narrow passageways to the Combat Information Center. As she entered, she immediately noticed the unusual concentration of senior officers gathered around the main tactical display. Captain Rodriguez, the carrier's commanding officer, looked up as she entered. "Chief Patel, we have a situation developing that may require your expertise." Maya stepped forward, conscious of the sudden attention. The tactical display showed a commercial vessel approximately 120 miles from their position, deep in an area known for pirate activity. Weather conditions around the vessel were deteriorating rapidly. 30 minutes ago, we received a distress call from the container ship Meridian Star, Rodriguez explained. They reported armed intruders had boarded the vessel. Initial communication indicated at least 15 crew members were being held in the ship's mess hall, with others possibly hiding throughout the vessel. Admiral Kimura, commander of the carrier group and rarely seen in the CIC during routine operations, stepped forward. "We have a SEAL team ready for immediate deployment. but weather conditions are complicating the insertion. The latest update shows storm cells developing between our position and the target vessel. Maya listened carefully, still unsure why she had been called to this briefing. As a maintenance chief, she rarely participated in mission planning. "Sir," she said carefully, "I'm not sure how I can assist with the hostage situation." "Captain." Rodriguez exchanged glances with Admiral Kimura before continuing. "We need to insert the SEAL team within the next hour before the hostage situation deteriorates further. Standard insertion protocol would use the MH6ORS, but the weather modeling shows severe turbulence and microbursts along the approach vector." Admiral Kimura tapped a command into the display, bringing up detailed weather patterns. The new helicopters aren't rated for these specific conditions. Their flight control systems are actually too sensitive for the extreme wind shear we're seeing. "But CS-2187 is," Maya said, understanding dawning. "The modified stabilization system and the mechanical backup controls would allow it to maintain flight integrity through those conditions." "Exactly," Rodriguez confirmed. "According to our records, CS-2187 was specifically modified for exactly this type of weather penetration after the Singapore incident in 2019. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She had heard about Singapore exactly once, when she was first assigned to CS-2187 3 years ago. A classified extraction operation during a severe tropical storm, details restricted to those with specific clearance. "There's one problem," Admiral Kimura said, his voice grave. "The pilot who was qualified on CS-2187's modified systems was transferred last month. The replacement isn't due for another 2 weeks. Maya looked around the room, noticing for the first time that all eyes were on her. "Sir, I'm maintenance, not flight crew. I'm not authorized to—" "Your file says otherwise, Chief," Captain Rodriguez interrupted, sliding a tablet toward her. On the screen was her service record, including a detail Maya had almost forgotten, her pilot training from before she transferred to Maintenance Division. "You completed basic and intermediate helicopter flight training before requesting transfer to maintenance 5 years ago," Admiral Kimura said. "You were actually qualified on the SH-60 platform, though you never completed the advanced tactical course." "That was a long time ago, sir," Maya said carefully. "And I've never flown a combat mission. But you know CS-2187 better than anyone. On this carrier," Rodriguez pressed, "you've literally had your hands on every system, every circuit, every control surface. And more importantly, you understand the modifications that make it capable of flying in these conditions." Lieutenant Commander Vasquez brought up another screen showing the storm patterns intensifying around the Meridian Star. "Weather window is closing fast. If we don't launch within the hour, those hostages might not make it. Pirates in this region have demonstrated willingness to execute crew members to make their demands clear." Maya stared at the weather display, then back at her service record. Her mind raced through the implications. She hadn't piloted an aircraft in years, but she had run thousands of simulations while testing CS-2187 systems. She knew its performance envelope better than anyone, how it would respond in every conceivable condition. "The SEAL team is already briefed and ready," Admiral Kimura said quietly. "They just need a pilot who can get them there." Captain Rodriguez stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I wouldn't ask this of you if there were any other option, Chief, but those are 15 civilians on that ship, and we're their only hope." Maya took a deep breath, thinking about all the time she'd been dismissed as just maintenance. All the pilots who had never bothered to learn her name, despite the fact that her work kept them alive every day. She thought about CS-2187, sitting in the hangar, days away from decommissioning but still perfectly capable of doing what newer aircraft couldn't. "I'll need a co-pilot who's current on basic Seahawk operations," she said finally. "Someone steady, who can handle standard flight controls while I manage the modified systems." Relief washed across Rodriguez's face. Lieutenant Diaz has already volunteered. He's waiting in the ready room. Sir, there's one more thing you should know, Maya said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to course through her system. The weather penetration mode on CS-2187 has a unique feature. Once activated, it temporarily disables some of the standard safety protocols to allow for enhanced maneuverability. It's not exactly a smooth ride. Admiral Kimura nodded grimly. The SEAL team commander has been briefed. They're prepared for extreme conditions. Then I need 10 minutes to change and complete my pre-flight, Maya said, already moving toward the door. Chief Patel, Captain Rodriguez called after her. She turned back to see him standing straighter, his expression solemn. Bring everyone home. Maya nodded once, sharply, and headed for the ready room. As she moved through the carrier's corridors, her mind was already shifting into pilot mode, remembering procedures and checklists she hadn't actively used in years, but that remained etched in her memory. In the ready room, Lieutenant Diaz stood as she entered. His expression showed surprise at seeing a maintenance chief in the briefing area, but he quickly masked it with professionalism. Chief Patel, they said you'd be command pilot for this mission. That's right, Lieutenant. I understand you volunteered as co-pilot. Diaz nodded, a hint of uncertainty crossing his features. Yes, ma'am, though I was expecting. He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. A regular pilot? Maya finished for him. Today you're getting a maintenance chief who happens to know how to fly. I need to know if that's going to be a problem. To his credit, Diaz straightened and met her gaze directly. No problem, ma'am. They said you know CS-2187 better than anyone. That's good enough for me. Good, because in about 40 minutes, we're going to be flying through weather that would ground any other helicopter on this carrier, delivering a SEAL team to a hostage situation. I need you to handle standard flight operations while I manage the modified systems. Can you do that? Yes, ma'am, Diaz replied without hesitation. Then let's gear up. The SEALs will meet us at the aircraft. As they made their way to the flight deck, Maya felt a strange calm settling over her. After years of maintaining aircraft for others to fly, she was finally going to put her knowledge to the ultimate test. Every modification she had installed, every system she had calibrated, every improvement she had made to CS-2187 was about to serve its purpose. And somewhere out on that stormy sea, 15 people were waiting for rescue, unaware that their lives now depended on a helicopter everyone had written off as obsolete and a maintenance chief no one had ever expected to fly. Lieutenant Commander Jackson was standing near the elevator to the flight deck, supervising the preparation of the MH-6 ORS that had been initially tasked with the mission before the weather deteriorated. His eyes widened as he saw Maya approaching. In a flight suit, Chief Patel? What are you doing in flight gear? Taking CS-2187 out for a mission, sir, she replied, not breaking stride. You? Flying? Jackson's confusion was evident. There must be some mistake. You're maintenance, not aircrew. No mistake, sir, Lieutenant Diaz intervened, handing Jackson the mission authorization tablet. Chief Patel is command pilot for the Meridian Star extraction. Captain's orders. Jackson scanned the tablet, his expression cycling through disbelief, confusion, and finally reluctant acceptance. This is highly irregular. The risks of sending maintenance personnel into a combat situation are less than the risks of sending an unmodified helicopter into those storm conditions. Maya finished for him. CS-2187 is the only aircraft that can make this insertion, and I'm the only one who fully understands its modified systems. Before Jackson could respond further, the hangar doors opened to reveal 6 SEAL team members approaching in full tactical gear. Their team leader, Lieutenant Commander Ramirez, nodded to Maya with none of the surprise or hesitation Jackson had shown. Chief Patel, Admiral Kimura said you'd be getting us in. What's our time to launch? 20 minutes, Commander. CS-2187 is being prepped now. Ramirez nodded again, all business. My team is ready when you are. We've been briefed to expect extreme conditions. It won't be a comfortable ride, Maya warned. But I'll get you there. That's all I need to know, Ramirez said simply, then turned to his team to complete their final preparations. Jackson watched this exchange with growing realization that he was witnessing something completely outside his understanding of normal protocol. Chief, I don't know what's happening here, but what's happening, sir? Maya said, her voice low enough that only Jackson could hear, is that 15 people need rescuing, and the helicopter you were just calling obsolete is their only hope. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a pre-flight to complete. As Maya walked away, she heard Jackson's voice behind her, speaking into his comm unit. Operations, this is Jackson. I need confirmation on the Meridian Star mission pilot authorization. They've got a maintenance chief prepping for launch. Maya smiled slightly to herself. Let him check. Let them all check. By the time they finished verifying what was happening, she'd be airborne. CS-2187 waited on the flight deck, its rotors already beginning their pre-flight rotation sequence. To Maya's surprise, a small ground crew had assembled around it, performing the final preparations with an efficiency that spoke of urgent purpose rather than routine duty. Chief Petty Officer Ramirez, the deck crew leader who had often assisted Maya with maintenance tasks, approached as she completed her walk-around inspection. She's ready, Chief, Ramirez said, handing Maya the final checklist. Full fuel, all. Systems green, weather penetration mode, prep for activation. Maya reviewed the checklist, noting that every item had been completed with meticulous care. Thank you, Chief. This is excellent work. Ramirez lowered his voice. Word's spreading about what you're doing, ma'am. Not everyone gets to see the maintenance chief fly the bird she's been keeping alive all these years. He gestured subtly toward the island structure of the carrier, where several officers had gathered to watch the unusual launch. Maya nodded her thanks and climbed into the cockpit, settling into the pilot's seat that she had adjusted countless times for others but never sat in herself during an actual mission. Lieutenant Diaz took the co-pilot position beside her, already running through his portion of the pre-flight checks. Communications check, Maya said, donning her helmet and adjusting the microphone. 5 by 5, came the response from the carrier's flight operations. SEAL team, comes check, she continued. SEAL team reads you loud and clear, Ramirez responded from the cabin behind her. We're secure and ready for departure. Maya's hands moved across the control panel with practiced efficiency, each switch and gauge responding exactly as she knew it would. This was the moment when all her years of maintaining CS-2187 would either prove their worth or reveal her overconfidence. The helicopter hummed to life around her, its vibrations familiar yet different from this new perspective. CS-2187, you are cleared for immediate takeoff, came the voice of the air boss. Weather update shows conditions deteriorating at target location. Time is critical. Copy that, Control. CS-2187 departing now, Maya responded, increasing power to the rotors. The Seahawk lifted smoothly from the deck, hovering momentarily before Maya tilted it forward into forward flight. As they cleared the carrier's superstructure, she could see the storm front ahead, a wall of dark clouds illuminated occasionally by lightning, stretching across the horizon like a fortress protecting the Meridian Star from rescue. Setting. Course for the Meridian Star, Maya announced, banking the helicopter toward the coordinates provided in the mission brief. Estimated time to target, 35 minutes. Lieutenant Diaz glanced at her, then at the storm ahead. Those conditions look worse than the briefing indicated. The new weather model just came in. Wind shear has increased by 30%. Maya nodded, already making calculations in her head. We'll need to activate weather penetration mode earlier than planned. Prepare for system transition at 20 miles out. As they approached the storm front, Maya felt CS-2187 respond to her inputs with the same reliability it had always shown during maintenance tests. Every control adjustment translated precisely into aircraft movement, the years of fine-tuning she had performed, creating a level of responsiveness that felt almost like an extension of her own body. Behind her, the SEAL team sat in tense silence, their expressions hidden behind tactical gear, but their posture revealing their awareness of what lay ahead. These were elite operators used to inserting into dangerous situations, but even they rarely flew directly into weather conditions that would ground most military aircraft. Approaching weather boundary, Diaz reported, his voice professional despite the tension evident in his posture. Wind gusts measuring up to 70 knots at the periphery. Beginning weather penetration sequence, Maya announced, her hands moving to a specialized panel that had been installed during CS-2187's modification. Lieutenant, transfer standard flight controls to my station and prepare to monitor stabilization systems. Transferring controls, Diaz confirmed, his hands moving in perfect coordination with Maya's. You have the aircraft. Maya took a deep breath and activated the weather penetration mode. Immediately, several indicators on the main console changed. From green to amber, not warnings, but notifications that the helicopter was now operating outside standard parameters. The Seahawk's handling characteristics shifted subtly, becoming more responsive but also more demanding of the pilot's attention. Weather penetration mode active, she announced. SEAL team, secure for extreme turbulence, we're going in. As CS-2187 entered the storm front, the world outside the cockpit windows disappeared into swirling darkness, punctuated by flashes of lightning. Rain hammered against the fuselage with a sound like gravel being thrown against metal, and the aircraft immediately began to buck and sway as conflicting air currents fought to knock it from the sky. Maya's hands moved continuously, making minute adjustments to keep the helicopter stable. This was what CS-2187 had been modified for, the ability to maintain controlled flight in conditions that would overwhelm standard flight control systems. The mechanical backups and enhanced stabilizers she had painstakingly maintained over the years now worked in perfect harmony, allowing the aircraft to absorb and compensate for wind patterns that would have sent other helicopters into unrecoverable spins. How are we doing this? Diaz murmured, his eyes wide as he monitored systems that were operating well beyond their standard parameters, yet remaining stable. We should have been forced to turn back by now. CS-2187 was built for exactly this, Maya replied, her focus absolute as she guided the helicopter through the heart of the storm. The modified control surfaces can react faster than standard systems, and the mechanical backups mean we're not dependent on electronics that can be affected by lightning. A particularly violent burst of turbulence slammed into them from below, causing the helicopter to lurch upward before Maya compensated, forcing it back onto its intended flight path. In the cabin, she heard the muffled sounds of the SEAL team bracing themselves against the sudden movement. 15 miles to target, Diaz reported, checking the navigation system. Meridian Star is holding position, but the pirates have moved the hostages to the upper deck. Possible preparation for execution. Maya felt her jaw tighten at the news. The situation was deteriorating even faster than feared. Informed the SEAL team. We need to increase speed. These conditions, Diaz began, concern evident in his voice. Pushing harder could. I know exactly what this aircraft can handle. Maya cut him off, already adjusting power settings to increase their forward speed. CS-2187 has more to give. The helicopter surged forward, cutting through the storm with increased determination. The airframe vibrated with the strain, but Maya could feel that they were still well within the safety margins she had personally established during years of maintenance and testing. Through breaks in the cloud cover, Maya caught glimpses of the churning sea below, waves peaked with white foam, tossed by winds that would make any sea rescue nearly impossible. If they couldn't insert the SEAL team directly onto the ship, those hostages would have no chance. 10 miles out, Diaz announced, getting first visual contact with the target vessel. Through the rain-streaked windshield, Maya could make out the dim shape of the Meridian Star, a large container ship riding low in the water, its deck lights creating a hazy glow in the storm. As they drew closer, details became clearer. The ship was being tossed by the waves but maintaining position, and figures could be seen moving on the upper deck. SEAL team, we have visual on the target, Maya reported. Preparing for insertion. Approach. Conditions at the ship are extreme. Deck is pitching significantly. Understood, came Ramirez's steady reply. We're prepared for fast rope deployment under any conditions. Maya began calculating approach vectors in her head. The standard insertion would come from the stern of the vessel, but with the severe wind conditions that would place CS-2187 in a dangerous crosswind position. Instead, she would need to approach from the port side, using the ship's superstructure as partial wind protection during the critical moments when the SEALs would be descending on ropes. Lieutenant, prepare for non-standard insertion, she instructed Diaz. We'll approach from port side, using the superstructure as a wind break. That's within 50 meters of where the hostages are being held, Diaz noted, concern in his voice. The pirates will see us coming. That's the point. Maya replied grimly. The storm will muffle our approach until the last moment, and when they do spot us, their attention will be divided. It gives the team their best chance. She keyed her mic to the SEAL frequency. Commander Ramirez, change of insertion point. We're coming in from the port side, close to the hostage position. You'll have minimal descent time and immediate contact. Are you prepared for that? Affirmative, came the immediate response. Closer is better, we can work with that. As they closed the final distance to the Meridian Star, the storm seemed to intensify around them, as if making one last attempt to prevent the rescue. CS-2187 shuddered under the assault of wind and rain, but Maya's hands remained steady on the controls, guiding the helicopter with the confidence that came from knowing every bolt and wire in its construction. 500 meters, Diaz called. Out, significant deck movement. Pitching up to 20 degrees. Compensating, Maya acknowledged, already adjusting their approach to match the ship's movement. This would be the most demanding part of the mission, holding a stable hover above a moving deck in storm conditions while the SEAL team deployed. 300 meters. We've been spotted. Movement on deck indicates they're aware of our approach. SEAL team, prepare for immediate deployment on my mark, Maya instructed, bringing CS-2187 into its final approach. We'll have one chance to get this right. As they closed to 100 meters, Maya could now clearly see armed men on the ship's deck, several of them moving toward what appeared to be a group of kneeling figures, the hostages. There was no more time for careful planning. Executing. Final approach now, she announced, pushing CS-2187 forward with sudden acceleration that caught even the SEALs by surprise. The helicopter burst through a final curtain of rain, appearing over the ship's port side like a ghost materializing from the storm. Maya brought the aircraft to a hover 30 feet above the deck, directly adjacent to where the hostages were being held. SEAL team, deploy now. The side doors of CS-2187 slid open, and within seconds, the SEAL team was descending on fast ropes, dropping onto the pitching deck with practiced precision. The moment the last team member was clear, Maya pulled the helicopter back, providing cover from above while staying out of the line of fire. What followed was a brief but intense exchange of gunfire, visible in bursts of light through the rain. Maya held CS-2187 steady above the chaos, ready to extract the team and hostages the moment the situation was secured. Deck secure, came Ramirez's voice after what seemed like an eternity, but was actually less than 2 minutes. Hostages safe. 4 tangos down, 3 captured. Beginning immediate extraction. We have wounded hostages. Copy that. Positioning for extraction, Maya responded, bringing CS-2187 back toward the deck, this time settling into a hover directly above the designated extraction point. The next 10 minutes were a carefully choreographed dance of precision flying and rapid evacuation. The SEAL team moved the hostages in groups of 3, helping them into the helicopter while Maya fought to keep the aircraft stable against the continuing assault of the storm. Each time the helicopter dipped toward the pitching deck, Maya's adjustments kept it from disaster by margins measured in inches. Final group boarding now, Ramirez reported. All hostages accounted for. 2 team members remaining on deck. Maya watched through the windshield as the last hostages were helped aboard, followed by the remaining SEAL team members. The moment the cabin door slid shut, she lifted CS-2187 away from the deck, banking hard to port and accelerating back into the protection of the storm. All secure, Diaz confirmed, relief evident in his voice. 15 hostages and 6 team members aboard, returning to carrier. As they re-entered the storm front, Maya felt a strange calm replace the intense focus of the Insertion. CS-2187 continued to battle the elements, but now it was carrying precious cargo, 21 lives that would have been lost without its unique capabilities and without her knowledge of how to use them. Control, this is CS-2187, she transmitted back to the carrier. Mission accomplished. All hostages secured. Returning to base with wounded requiring medical attention. ETA 30 minutes. The response came not from the usual flight controller, but from Captain Rodriguez himself. Outstanding work, Chief. Patel, medical teams are standing by. You've just written a new chapter in naval aviation history. Maya allowed herself a small smile as she guided CS-2187 through the heart of the storm, heading home. The helicopter that everyone had dismissed as obsolete, flown by a maintenance chief no one had considered a real pilot, had just accomplished what no other aircraft on the carrier could have done. Behind her, in the cabin, the rescued hostages sat in exhausted silence, many of them still in shock from their ordeal, but all of them alive because she had been willing to step outside her assigned role and do what needed to be done. Lieutenant Diaz glanced over at her, a new respect evident in his expression. That was the most incredible flying I've ever seen. Chief, I don't think anyone else on this carrier could have pulled that off. Maya nodded her acknowledgement, but kept her focus on the controls. There would be time for recognition later. Right now, her job was to get everyone home safely, and CS-2187 still had to battle its way back through the same storm that had nearly prevented the rescue in the first place. The journey back was no less challenging than the approach had been, but Maya flew with the confidence of someone who had already proven what she and her aircraft were capable of. CS-2187 responded to her every command with mechanical precision, cutting through the storm with the same reliability it had always shown under her maintenance. As they finally broke free of the weather front and the carrier came into view on the horizon, Maya felt a profound connection to the helicopter beneath her hands. This aircraft wasn't just a machine she had maintained. It was a partner that had trusted her as much as she had trusted it. CS-2187, you are cleared for priority. Landing, came the voice of the air boss. Deck is clear, medical team standing by. Copy that, Control. Beginning final approach, Maya responded, guiding the helicopter toward the waiting carrier. As CS-2187 settled onto the flight deck with perfect precision, Maya completed the shutdown sequence with the same methodical care she had always shown during maintenance. Only when the rotors had stopped turning and the medical teams had begun evacuating the wounded hostages did she finally release her grip on the controls and allow herself to feel the weight of what had just been accomplished. Lieutenant Diaz removed his helmet and turned to her, his expression solemn. Chief, I just want to say, I've been flying for 8 years, and I've never seen anyone handle an aircraft like that. What you did today wasn't just good flying. It was impossible. Flying. Maya nodded her thanks, too exhausted for words. As she climbed out of the cockpit onto the flight deck, she was surprised to see a crowd had gathered, not just the medical teams and deck crew, but officers and enlisted personnel from throughout the carrier, all watching in respectful silence as the hostages were helped from the helicopter that had saved their lives. Captain Rodriguez approached, his uniform soaked from the rain that was now reaching the carrier itself. "Chief Patel, report to my ready room as soon as the wounded are evacuated. There are some people very interested in what you just accomplished." Maya nodded, her eyes already turning back to CS-2187. The helicopter sat on the deck, rain streaming down its sides, looking neither obsolete nor remarkable, just a machine that had done exactly what it was designed to do in the hands of someone who understood its true capabilities. What had begun as a routine day of maintenance had become something else entirely, a mission that would redefine not just her role on the carrier, but her understanding of her own potential. The tail number CS-2187, once destined for decommissioning, now represented something different, proof that sometimes the most valuable assets are the ones most easily overlooked, and that true capability isn't always found where you expect it. As the last of the hostages was wheeled away toward the medical bay, Maya straightened her flight suit and prepared to face whatever came next. She was no longer just maintenance, she was a pilot who had done the impossible. And she had the feeling that CS-2187's story, like her own, was far from over. Captain Rodriguez's ready room was smaller than Maya had expected, compact and efficient like everything else on the carrier. Unlike the command centers with their screens and personnel, this space was designed for private conversations that would shape missions and careers. The captain sat behind his desk, but he wasn't alone. Admiral Kimura stood by the window, watching the ongoing storm, while a third officer Maya didn't recognize sat in the corner, studying a tablet with intense focus. "Chief Patel," Rodriguez began, gesturing to a chair. "Please sit." Maya remained at attention. "I prefer to stand, sir." Admiral Kimura turned from the window. "At ease, Chief. What you did today has earned you the right to sit in any chair on this carrier." Reluctantly, Maya took the offered seat, suddenly aware of how exhausted she felt. The adrenaline that had carried her through the mission was fading, leaving behind the bone-deep weariness that comes after pushing both body and mind to their limits. "Before we begin," Rodriguez said, "I want you to understand that everything discussed in this room is classified at the highest level. The official report will state that the Meridian Star hostages were rescued by a standard SEAL team insertion supported by experienced flight crew. Your name will not appear in any public documentation." Maya nodded, unsurprised. The Navy had protocols for everything, including keeping extraordinary actions buried in classified files. "With that said," the captain continued, "we need to discuss what actually happened today. Your piloting of CS-2187 was—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Unprecedented." "The weather penetration mode worked as designed, sir," Maya replied simply. "The aircraft performed within expected parameters." Admiral Kimura made a sound somewhere between a cough and a laugh. "Expected parameters? Chief, we've reviewed the flight data. You flew through conditions that would have torn any other helicopter apart. The wind shear alone exceeded safety margins by over 60%. CS-2187 was built to handle those conditions, sir." The third officer finally looked up from his tablet. "That's exactly what we need to discuss, Chief Patel." He stood and approached, offering his hand. "Commander James Carter, Naval Special Projects Division. Until 4 hours ago, I thought I was the only person who remembered Project Tempest." Maya felt her pulse quicken as she shook his hand. Emma Chun stepped onto the rugged training grounds of Fort Blackwater with boots that seemed too big for her 5'2" frame. Her petite body was almost swallowed by the standard issue fatigues that hung loose despite alterations. At 28, she looked nothing like the towering soldiers who dominated the elite rescue training facility. No one could have guessed that this small woman they dismissed would soon carry 3 wounded men to safety through conditions that broke even the strongest recruits. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emma hadn't been back to a military installation in 3 years. Not since she'd walked away from her promising career after a mission that left her questioning everything. Today, she was here as an observer, accompanying her friend Dr. Nadia. Right, a trauma specialist invited to assess the facility's medical evacuation protocols. Fort Blackwater wasn't just any training center. It was the premier combat rescue facility where the military's most physically imposing soldiers came to earn their elite status. Everything about Fort Blackwater screamed strength and power. The obstacle courses were designed to challenge even Olympic athletes. The medical simulation buildings recreated the most challenging extraction scenarios imaginable. The training equipment cost millions, and the soldiers selected for the program were chosen primarily for their physical capabilities. Most stood over 6 feet tall with builds that intimidated at first glance. Their gear was cutting edge, their muscles were sculpted to perfection, and their confidence matched their imposing stature. Emma carried only a small backpack containing a notebook, water bottle, and a few protein bars. She walked with quiet confidence, her eyes unconsciously scanning the facility, noting exit routes, calculating distances, identifying potential hazards. Old habits never really disappeared. The stares began immediately. A cluster of trainees near the equipment shed didn't even try to lower their voices. "Who let the high school student in?" one said, his voice carrying across the yard. "Bring your daughter to work day was last month." A woman with broad shoulders and arms that could probably bench press Emma's entire body looked her up and down. "What's she going to do in an emergency? Ask the enemy to please stop shooting while she finds a step stool?" The mockery wasn't subtle or kind. To them, Emma was an anomaly, a disruption to their understanding of what a rescue specialist should look like. They saw her small stature and automatically filed her under incapable. The jokes continued as Emma stood quietly, observing the training preparations without reaction. "Maybe she's here to test the child-sized dummies," another trainee suggested, generating a burst of laughter from his companions. Emma didn't speak or defend herself. She simply stood there, composed and still, watching as the training teams assembled their gear for the day's exercises. The facility kept watching her too, judging her, measuring her against their narrow definition of capability, and ultimately dismissing her. They had no idea that the woman they saw as insignificant would soon become the most important person any of them would. "Remember." Dr. Wright emerged from the command building and approached Emma with an apologetic smile. "Sorry about the delay. Command briefing ran long." "I see you've been making friends," she added sarcastically, noticing the not-so-subtle glances from the trainees. "Nothing I haven't heard before," Emma replied, her voice calm and measured. "What's on the agenda today?" "They're running extraction simulations in the mountain terrain course. Multiple casualties, hostile conditions, the works. We'll be observing from the command center." Dr. Wright gestured toward a building with tinted windows, overlooking the massive training grounds. As they walked, Emma felt the weight of dozens of eyes following her. The whispers continued, some amused, others dismissive. One instructor even chuckled openly as she passed. Emma's expression never changed. She'd faced worse than playground bullies in her career. Inside the command center, screens displayed various angles of the training course. Rescue teams were gearing up, checking equipment, and reviewing extraction protocols. Emma recognized the routine. The methodical preparation that meant the difference between life and death in real-world scenarios. On the largest screen, Lieutenant Marcus Davidson was briefing his team, his 6'4" frame dominating the huddle of equally imposing soldiers. "That's their star performer," Dr. Wright explained, nodding toward Davidson. "Former football player, built like a tank, can carry 200 pounds of gear uphill without breaking a sweat. Command thinks he's their next great leader." Emma studied him silently, noting his confident stance, the way his team responded to him, the slight hitch in his preparation routine that spoke of overconfidence rather than thoroughness. Colonel Patricia Rivera entered the command center, her crisp uniform and ramrod posture demanding immediate respect. Her eyes landed on Emma, narrowed slightly, then moved to Dr. Wright. "Doctor, glad you could join us. The observation deck is prepared for your assessment." Her voice was professionally cordial, but carried an edge that suggested she viewed this entire assessment as an unnecessary formality. Dr. Wright nodded. "Thank you, Colonel. This is Emma Chun, my assistant for today's observation." Rivera's gaze returned to Emma, traveling from her small frame to her unassuming appearance, making no attempt to hide her skepticism. "Miss Chun, this is a restricted facility. Observers must remain in designated areas at all times. This is not a spectator sport. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." "Understood, Colonel," Emma replied simply, the Colonel's eyebrow raised slightly at Emma's calm response, as if she'd expected nervousness or intimidation. Finding neither, she turned back to the screens. "Teams will deploy in 15 minutes. Weather conditions on the mountain have deteriorated faster than anticipated. We're looking at heavy rain, poor visibility, and temperatures dropping below what's forecast." She spoke to the room at large, though her words seemed particularly directed at Dr. Wright. "These are the conditions our people train for. Real rescues don't wait for sunny days." Dr. Wright nodded. "We're not here to interfere, Colonel, only to observe and assess." The mockery continues as Emma and Dr. Wright make their way to the observation deck, a raised platform at the edge of the base camp that offers a clear view of the mountain training grounds. The rain has started, light at first but steadily increasing in intensity. Teams are finalizing their equipment checks, double wrapping sensitive gear against the weather. Lieutenant Davidson spots Emma as she takes her position at the observation rail. He nudges his second in command, nodding in her direction with an amused expression. "Hey, Tiny," he calls out, his voice carrying easily across the staging area. "You might want to head inside. Wouldn't want you to blow away in the wind." His team laughs on cue, the sound rippling across the yard. Emma remains still, her expression unchanging as she continues to observe the preparations. "I'm serious," Davidson continues, encouraged by his team's reaction. "We've got 3 dummy casualties up there that weigh more than you do. One good gust and you'll end up in the next county." More laughter. Emma shifts her weight slightly, adjusting her stance against the increasing wind, but says nothing. Her silence seems to irritate Davidson more than any response would have. "What's the matter, Short Stack? Can't hear me from up there?" He cups his hands around his mouth in an exaggerated gesture. "Need me to lift you up so you can see better?" Dr. Wright steps forward, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. "Lieutenant, perhaps you should focus on your mission preparations rather than harassing observers." Davidson's smile doesn't falter. "Just concern for safety, ma'am." She looks like she belongs in middle school, not a combat rescue facility. Emma places a hand on Dr. Wright's arm, a gentle request to let it go. She's heard worse, much worse, and responded with the same steady silence. She's learned that some battles aren't worth fighting, especially against those who've already decided what you're capable of, based on appearances. Another team leader, Sergeant Maya Ortiz, approaches Davidson with a disapproving expression. "Cut it out, Mark. You're embarrassing yourself." She glances at Emma with something that might be respect, or at least professional courtesy. "Sorry about him." "Some people never outgrow high school," Davidson shrugs, unrepentant. "Just having some fun, Ortiz. Not my fault they sent us a pocket-sized observer." Ortiz shakes her head and returns to her team, clearly uncomfortable with Davidson's behavior, but unwilling to challenge him further. The power dynamics are obvious. Davidson is the golden boy, the one expected to lead this exercise to perfect completion. Few are willing to risk his displeasure. As the teams begin moving toward their deployment positions, a trainee with Rodriguez stitched on his uniform breaks away momentarily, passing near Emma. He holds out a child-sized raincoat, bright yellow, and clearly borrowed from the facility's family visitor supplies. "Here," he says loudly enough for his teammates to hear. "This might fit you better. Don't want you catching cold out here with the grown-ups." But as Maya approached, the crew stepped back, creating a path for her. Chief Petty Officer Ramirez approached, offering a salute that maintenance personnel rarely received. Chief Patel, the bird's in perfect condition. Not even a stress indicator. Out of normal range, whatever you did up there, it worked. "Thanks, Chief. I'd like a moment alone with her, if that's all right." Ramirez nodded, signaling the crews to take a break. Soon, Maya stood alone beside the helicopter that had carried her through impossible conditions and brought 15 people home safely. She ran her hand along the fuselage, feeling the still warm metal beneath her palm. CS-2187 had been more than just a machine today. It had been the embodiment of Commander Martinez's legacy, a vessel for Maya's own unexpressed potential, and the difference between life and death for the Meridian Star hostages. The tail number CS-2187, once just a maintenance designation to her, now carried weight and history. A helicopter that had been dismissed as obsolete, piloted by a maintenance chief others had underestimated, had accomplished something no other aircraft or pilot on the carrier could have done. Chief Patel. Maya turned to find Lieutenant Commander Jackson standing at the entrance to the bay, his expression unreadable. She straightened, preparing for another dismissive comment or bureaucratic objection. Instead, Jackson approached slowly, his usual confidence replaced by something that looked almost like humility. "I owe you an apology, sir. I made assumptions about you, about this aircraft." He gestured toward CS-2187. "I was wrong. What you did today." He trailed off, seemingly at a loss for words. "I was just doing my job, sir," Maya replied, falling back on the standard response. Jackson shook his head. "No, you weren't. You were doing something extraordinary that no one else could have done. Something that saved 15 lives." He extended his hand. "Thank you." Maya accepted the handshake, recognizing what it must have cost this proud officer to acknowledge his error so directly. "The SEAL team commander asked me to give you this," Jackson continued, handing her a small package wrapped in cloth. "He said you earned it today." Maya unwrapped the cloth to find a SEAL team patch, modified with the number 15 embroidered in gold thread, representing the 15 lives she had saved. "They don't give those to just anyone," Jackson said quietly. "In fact, I've never seen them give one to anyone outside their community." As he walked away, Maya felt the weight of the day's events settling around her shoulders. In the span of a few hours, she had gone from being dismissed as just maintenance to being recognized as someone capable of extraordinary achievement. The patch in her hand and the pin in her pocket were tangible reminders that others had seen her potential, even when she had set it aside. Lieutenant Diaz appeared at the hangar entrance, still in his flight suit. He approached with a mix of respect and camaraderie that hadn't been there before the mission. "Chief, the hostages are asking to meet you. Medical has cleared them for visitors. They want to thank the pilot who got them out." Maya hesitated. "The official report won't mention my involvement." Diaz smiled. Maybe not, but those 15 people know exactly who flew through that storm to save them. Some things matter more than official reports. As they walked toward the medical bay, Diaz kept pace beside her. Have they offered you a return to flight status yet? Maya glanced at him, surprised. How did you know they would? Because any commander with half a brain would want you in the cockpit after what you did today, he replied simply. Flying through conditions that would have grounded every other pilot on this carrier. That's not the kind of talent you leave fixing engines, no matter how good you are at it. They reached the medical bay, where the rescued hostages were being treated for their ordeal. As Maya entered, conversation stopped, and all eyes turned toward her. A middle-aged woman, her arm in a sling, stepped forward. Are you the pilot? She asked, her voice still rough from the strain of her captivity. Maya nodded. Chief Patel. I was part of the team that, before she could finish, the woman embraced her with her good arm. Thank you. We thought we were going to die on that ship. The pirates told us no one could reach us in the storm, that they'd start executing us one by one until their demands were met. Her voice broke. We could hear your helicopter before we could see it. It sounded impossible, coming through that storm when nothing should have been able to fly. One by one, the other hostages approached, each offering thanks in their own way. Some spoke of the terror they had felt when the pirates began moving them to the upper deck, the despair of believing that rescue was impossible, and the sudden surge of hope when CS-2187 appeared through the curtain of rain like an apparition. A young engineer from the Meridian Star's crew described watching through a cabin window as Maya held the helicopter in a perfect hover, despite winds that were tossing the massive container ship like a toy. I've worked on ships for 12 years, he said, and I've never seen flying like that. It shouldn't have been possible. As Maya listened to their stories, something shifted inside her. The technical satisfaction of maintaining aircraft had always been enough for her. The quiet pride of knowing her work kept others safe, but this was different. Seeing firsthand the impact of her actions, hearing from the people whose lives she had saved, awakened something she had buried years ago when she stepped away from pilot training. When she finally left the medical bay, her decision was made. She found Admiral Kimura on the bridge, overseeing operations as the carrier group adjusted its position in response to the ongoing storm. Admiral, may I have a word? Kimura stepped aside, creating a pocket of privacy amidst the activity of the bridge. Of course, Chief. Have you had time to consider our offer? I have, sir. I'd like to resume pilot training with a focus on special operations aircraft. Kimura nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. I think that's the right choice. Chief, the Navy needs pilots who understand their aircraft at the deepest level, who can push the boundaries of what's possible because they know exactly where those boundaries lie. There's one condition. Sir, the Admiral raised an eyebrow. You're in a position to make conditions now, are you? Just one, sir. CS-2187 stays with me. Wherever I'm assigned, that helicopter comes too. Its systems are unique, and I've spent 3 years optimizing them. No one else understands it the way I do. Kimura considered this for a moment. That's irregular, Chief. Aircraft assignments are normally determined by operational requirements, not pilot preferences. CS-2187 isn't a normal aircraft, sir. And after today, I don't think I qualify as a normal pilot. Maya met his gaze directly. Commander Martinez gave her life to prove what that helicopter is capable of. I just demonstrated that her sacrifice wasn't in vain. CS-2187 deserves a pilot who understands its full potential. A slow smile spread across the Admiral's face. You know, Chief, I had a bet with Captain Rodriguez about whether you'd make this exact request. I'm pleased to say I just won. He extended his hand. Consider it done. You and CS-2187 will remain a team wherever that takes you. As Maya shook his hand, She felt a sense of rightness settle over her. She had spent years maintaining an aircraft that others had dismissed as obsolete, only to discover that it had been waiting for the right moment and the right pilot to demonstrate its true capabilities. Tomorrow there would be paperwork and procedures, training schedules, and transition plans. The Navy excelled at turning even extraordinary events into orderly processes. But for tonight, Maya had one more thing to do. She returned to the hangar, now quiet as the night shift began their work. CS-2187 waited in its bay, illuminated by soft maintenance lights that highlighted its weathered but powerful form. Maya climbed into the cockpit one more time, not as a maintenance chief checking systems, but as a pilot connecting with her aircraft. Her hands moved across the controls, feeling the responsive systems she had calibrated countless times. From this perspective, CS-2187 wasn't just a collection of components she had maintained. It was a partner that had carried her through impossible conditions, responding to her commands with precision born of mutual understanding. "We did good today," she said softly to the empty cockpit. "Commander Martinez would be proud." As if in response, the aircraft seemed to settle around her, the metal cooling and contracting in the night air with soft pings and creaks that Maya had heard 1,000 times during maintenance but never from the pilot's seat. In that moment, Maya Patel understood that she had never really left flying behind. She had simply been approaching it from a different angle, learning the soul of aircraft from the inside out, preparing for a moment when that knowledge would make the difference between life and death. The maintenance chief, who had been dismissed as just support staff, had proven herself to be something far more, a pilot who could fly through storms that grounded everyone else, who understood her aircraft so completely that she could push it beyond its supposed limits into the realm of the impossible. And CS-2187, the helicopter everyone had written off as obsolete, had proven itself to be exactly what its designers had intended, a machine capable of reaching those who could not be reached, of saving those who could not be saved, when piloted by someone who truly understood its capabilities. Together, they had rewritten what was possible in naval aviation. And this was just the beginning. 6 months after the Meridian Star rescue, Maya Patel stood in the briefing room at Naval Air Station Coronado, watching as 20 pilots and flight engineers studied the holographic display of CS-2187's modified systems. The room hummed with focused energy as these experienced aviators, some of the Navy's best, struggled to grasp concepts that had become second nature to her over years of maintenance work. "The critical difference is in the mechanical backup systems," Maya explained, manipulating the display to highlight a series of components most helicopters didn't possess. When weather penetration mode is activated, these take precedence over the digital controls. Your hands are directly connected to the control surfaces through a hybrid system that can respond faster than standard fly-by-wire. Commander Vega, a veteran pilot with over 3,000 flight hours, raised his hand. "That's counter to everything we've been taught about modern aircraft. The whole industry has moved toward digital systems precisely because they're more reliable." "In normal conditions, yes," Maya agreed. "But severe weather creates electromagnetic interference that can compromise digital systems. Lightning strikes, microbursts, extreme precipitation. They all introduce variables that computers struggle to process quickly enough. The mechanical backup provides certainty in uncertain conditions. It's like driving a classic car instead of a modern one," offered Lieutenant Commander Santiago, one of the few in the room who had immediately grasped the concept. "Less comfortable, requires more skill, but when everything goes sideways, you know exactly what it's going to do." Maya nodded. "Exactly. Modern helicopters are designed to keep pilots from exceeding safety parameters. CS-2187 is designed to let you push past them when necessary while still maintaining control." As the pilots continued their discussion, Maya's mind drifted to the journey that had brought her here. After the Meridian Star rescue, she had expected to be sent immediately back to pilot training. Instead, Admiral Kimura and Commander Carter had crafted a different path, one that honored both her maintenance expertise and her flying skills. The new Project Tempest had been established with Maya as its first instructor. Rather than simply returning her to the cockpit, they had recognized that her unique understanding of CS-2187 systems made her the ideal person to train others. The program had grown rapidly, with funding that would have been unimaginable before. Her historic flight. Now 6 months later, she wore the dual insignia of both maintenance chief and flight instructor, a combination so rare that a new designation had been created specifically for her position. And CS-2187, once slated for decommissioning, had become the centerpiece of a program that was redefining what was possible in maritime rescue operations. "Chief Patel," called a voice from the doorway, interrupting her thoughts. Commander Carter stood there, his expression conveying urgency without alarm. "A word, please?" Maya turned the briefing over to Santiago and followed Carter into the hallway. "We have a situation developing," he said without preamble. "Typhoon Mirai has intensified far beyond predictions. It's now a Category 5 and tracking directly toward the Philippine Sea." Maya frowned. Typhoons were common in the region, but one reaching Category 5 this early in the season was unusual. "Our assets in the area? That's the problem. The USS Jefferson carrier group is positioned along the Typhoon's projected path. They've begun evasive maneuvers, but there's a complication." Carter handed her a tablet displaying a satellite image of a small research vessel. "The Horizon Explorer marine research platform. Engine failure has left them dead in the water directly in the Typhoon's path." Maya studied the image, her mind already calculating possibilities. "Standard rescue assets? Jefferson has dispatched 2 MH-6 ORS, but they're reporting conditions already beyond safe operational parameters. The Typhoon is generating winds in excess of 175 knots with extreme precipitation. They've been ordered to return to the carrier." Maya met Carter's gaze, understanding immediately why he had come to her. "How many people on the research vessel?" 22 scientists and crew. They've got maybe 6 hours before the Typhoon's eye wall reaches their position." "And you want me to take CS-2187 out there?" It wasn't a question. Carter nodded. "We can have you and the helicopter airlifted to the Jefferson within 3 hours. From there, it would be your call whether an extraction is possible." Maya considered this. The Meridian Star rescue had been challenging, but this would be on another level entirely. A Category 5 Typhoon generated conditions that no aircraft was officially rated to withstand. Who would authorize this mission? After Meridian Star, there was significant pushback from certain Pentagon officials about unauthorized risk-taking. Carter's expression hardened slightly. "This comes directly from the Secretary of the Navy, after reviewing your mission reports and CS-2187's performance data. He's personally authorized the deployment." His exact words were, "If anyone can get those people out, it's Patel and that damn helicopter." Despite the gravity of the situation, Maya felt a flicker of satisfaction. The maintenance chief, who had once been dismissed as support staff, was now being called upon by name at the highest levels of naval command. "I'll need Santiago as my co-pilot," she said. "He's the only one in the training group who truly understands the modified systems." "Already arranging it," Carter confirmed. "What else?" "Full technical support team. If CS-2187 takes damage during the approach, we may need emergency repairs before extraction or return flight." Carter nodded. "Granted, anything else?" Maya thought of the 22 lives hanging in the balance, of the monster storm bearing down on them, and of Commander Martinez, who had given her life in similar circumstances. "Just one thing," she said quietly. "Make sure everyone understands that once we launch, The decisions are mine. No second guessing from the carrier commander, no mid-mission parameter changes from headquarters. In conditions like that, hesitation kills. I'll make that absolutely clear, Carter promised. The transport will be ready in 20 minutes. I suggest you prepare quickly. As he walked away, Maya stood for a moment in the empty hallway, feeling the weight of responsibility settle around her shoulders. 6 months ago, she had flown into a severe storm on impulse, driven by the immediate need to save lives. Now she was deliberately preparing to fly into conditions far worse, with full knowledge of the risks. She pulled out her phone and made a quick call. "Captain Rodriguez," came the familiar voice. He had been promoted after the Meridian Star incident and now commanded his own destroyer. "Sir, it's Chief Patel. I'm being deployed to the Jefferson for a Typhoon extraction." There was a pause then. "Mirai, that's a Category 5, Maya." "Yes. Sir, 22 personnel on a research vessel, directly in its path." Another pause. "CS-2187 is good, but those conditions. Have you seen the satellite imagery?" "I have. It's going to be right at the edge of what's possible, maybe beyond." Rodriguez's voice softened. "Why are you calling me, Maya?" She hadn't fully articulated the reason to herself until that moment. "Because you were there for my first impossible mission. I guess I wanted someone who understands to know about my second." "You're not Commander Martinez," Rodriguez said gently. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone." "This isn't about proving anything," Maya replied. "It's about 22 people who will die if I don't try. I know." His voice carried both concern and respect. "Just remember, what makes you special isn't just your ability to fly in impossible conditions. It's your judgment about when those risks are necessary and when they're not. Trust that judgment, whatever decision you make once you're out there." "Thank you, sir. And Maya, come back this time." "That's an order." 3 hours later, Maya stood on the flight deck of the USS Jefferson, the massive carrier pitching noticeably as it navigated away from the approaching typhoon. CS-2187 had been airlifted aboard and now sat on the deck, maintenance crews swarming around it, preparing it for what might be the most challenging flight of its service life. Lieutenant Commander Santiago approached, already in his flight suit. "Chief, the carrier commander wants to speak with you before we prep for launch." Maya nodded, unsurprised. Despite Carter's assurances, she had expected some resistance from the Jefferson's command staff. She followed Santiago to the bridge, where Captain Harrison waited, his expression grim as he studied weather displays showing the massive storm. "System, Chief Patel," he greeted her without preamble. "I've been ordered to provide you with whatever support you require for this rescue attempt. Before we proceed, I need to be clear about something." Here it comes, Maya thought. The speech. About unnecessary risks, about asset preservation, about following standard protocols. "I sent 2 of my best helicopter crews to attempt this rescue 3 hours ago," Harrison continued. "They're both excellent pilots with thousands of hours of experience. They couldn't get within 20 miles of the research vessel before conditions forced them to turn back." He turned to face her directly. "What makes you think you can succeed where they failed?" It was a fair question, asked without condescension or doubt, one professional seeking honest assessment from another. "2 reasons, Captain," Maya replied. "First, CS-2187 has modifications specifically designed for extreme weather penetration that your MH-60RS don't possess. Second, I understand those modifications at a level no one else does, because I've spent years maintaining and improving them." Harrison studied her for a moment. "You were a maintenance chief before returning to flight status." "I still am, sir. I hold dual qualification." Something in the captain's expression shifted. "That explains it, then. When they told me they were sending a pilot who could fly through a Category 5 Typhoon, I was skeptical. But an engineer who flies..." He nodded as if a puzzle piece had fallen into place. You understand the aircraft's capabilities from the inside out? Yes. Sir. Harrison turned back to the weather display. The situation has deteriorated further. The Horizon Explorer is reporting structural damage from the outer bands of the storm. Their estimate is that they have less than 4 hours before conditions become unsurvivable. He tapped the screen, highlighting a narrow corridor through the storm's spiral bands. Our meteorologists have identified what might be a viable approach vector here, where the band structure is slightly less intense. It would still exceed all standard safety parameters, but it might give you a fighting chance. Maya studied the proposed route. It would require threading between 2 of the most intense precipitation bands, navigating a corridor that would shift and change as the Typhoon continued its advance. Thank you, Captain. This is helpful. Harrison turned to face her again. One more thing, Chief. I've been ordered to give you complete operational autonomy for this mission, and I will. But I want to be absolutely clear. This rescue is important, but not at the cost of your life or the lives of your crew. If at any point you determine that extraction is impossible, you are to abort immediately. No heroic last stands, no suicide runs. Those scientists knew the risks when they deployed to Typhoon territory. Maya met his gaze. With respect, sir. I don't believe anyone expects to be abandoned to die in a storm because their engine failed at the wrong time. Harrison's expression softened slightly. No, I suppose not. Just promise me you'll exercise good judgment out there. The Navy has invested a lot in you and that remarkable helicopter. I'd hate to lose either. I promise to make decisions I can live with, sir. The captain seemed to recognize this was the best assurance he would get. Very well. You have full clearance to launch when ready. Godspeed, Chief Patel. 30 minutes later, Maya sat in CS-2187's cockpit, running through the pre-flight checklist with Santiago beside her. The specialized weather penetration systems had been thoroughly checked, and the helicopter was as ready as it would ever be for what lay ahead. Through the windshield, Maya could see the edge of Typhoon Mirai on the horizon, a wall of dark clouds that seemed to reach from the sea to the stratosphere, periodically illuminated by lightning that flashed like artillery. Fire within its depths. The flight deck crew chief approached, giving her a thumbs up. All systems green, Chief Patel. You're clear to launch at your discretion. Maya nodded her thanks and turned to Santiago. Last chance to reconsider, Commander. Once we enter the storm, turning back becomes exponentially more difficult. Santiago checked his harness one final time. 22 people are counting on us, Chief. Besides, I've spent 6 months learning these systems. Time to put that training to work. Maya smiled briefly, then keyed her radio. Jefferson Control. This is CS-2187 requesting immediate clearance. For launch. CS-2187, you are cleared for immediate takeoff, came the response. Weather update shows conditions continuing to deteriorate at target location. Horizon Explorer reports waves now exceeding 40 feet and increasing structural damage. Copy that, Control. CS-2187 departing now. Maya increased power to the rotors, feeling CS-2187 respond with the familiar vibration that had become almost comforting over the years. The helicopter lifted from the deck, hovering momentarily before she tilted it forward, accelerating away from the carrier toward the waiting storm. As they flew, the sea beneath them transformed from merely rough to violently churning, whitecaps giving way to massive swells that rose and fell like moving mountains. The sky ahead darkened, the wall of clouds growing more intimidating with each passing minute. Approaching outer precipitation band, Santiago reported, monitoring the weather radar. Wind gusts already exceeding 90 knots. Beginning weather penetration sequence, Maya responded, her hands moving to the specialized control panel. Transfer standard flight controls to my station and prepare to monitor stabilization systems. Transferring controls. You have the aircraft. Maya took a deep breath and activated the weather penetration mode. As before, indicators shifted from green to amber, signaling that CS-2187 was now operating outside standard parameters. The helicopter's handling characteristics changed, becoming more responsive, but also more demanding. Weather penetration mode active, she announced. Entering Typhoon outer band in 3, 2, 1. The world outside the cockpit transformed. From gray daylight to near darkness as they plunged into the first wall of rain and cloud. Immediately, CS-2187 began to buck and heave as conflicting air currents battled to knock it from the sky. The noise was deafening, rain hammering against the fuselage like machine gun fire, wind howling around every surface. Maya's hands moved continuously, making the minute adjustments necessary to keep the helicopter stable. The mechanical backup. Systems responded instantly to her inputs, allowing CS-2187 to counter wind shears that would have overwhelmed digital controls. First band penetration successful, Santiago reported, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. 15 miles to the corridor between major bands. They pressed on, the conditions worsening with every mile. The sky flashed with near-continuous lightning, the electrical charges creating halos around the helicopter's metal surfaces. Twice, severe downbursts forced Maya to drop altitude rapidly, skimming just above wave peaks that would have swallowed the aircraft whole had she miscalculated. Horizon Explorer, this is Navy Rescue CS-2187. Maya transmitted, uncertain if their signal could penetrate the storm's interference. We are inbound to your position. Please confirm status. Through heavy static, a voice responded. CS-2187. This is Horizon Explorer. We read you. Conditions here are beyond critical. Hull breach on lower deck, list increasing to port side. How are you even flying in this? Special equipment, Maya replied simply. Prepare your personnel for immediate evacuation. We'll be at your position in approximately 20 minutes. Understood. God bless you for trying. As they pressed deeper into the Typhoon, Maya felt CS-2187 straining against forces it had never been designed to withstand, even with its modifications. The airframe vibrated with a new harmonic that suggested components were approaching their structural limits. Chief, Santiago called over the roar of the storm. The stress indicators for the tail assembly are entering red zone. We're exceeding the design parameters of even the reinforced components. Maya nodded, already aware from the helicopter's feedback through the controls. Reducing airspeed. Adjusting approach angle. We need to find the sweet spot between forward progress and structural integrity. They continued through the corridor. Between major bands, the relative calm, still featuring winds that would have grounded any standard aircraft. Ahead loomed the Typhoon's inner bands, walls of cloud and rain even more intense than what they had already traversed. 10 miles to target, Santiago reported, but the inner band is... Chief, I've never seen readings like this. Wind velocities are approaching 200 knots in the microburst zones. Maya studied the weather radar, considering their options. The direct approach would take them through the worst of the inner band, subjecting CS-2187 to forces that might tear it apart regardless of her skill or the modifications. But there was another possibility. We need to go up, she decided, already adjusting their course. Above the inner band, Santiago looked at her in surprise. Above? That's at least 20,000 feet. The oxygen system isn't rated for, not above the entire Typhoon, Maya clarified. Just high enough to cross over the inner band at its thinnest. Point, then descend directly to the Horizon Explorer through the eye wall. It was a dangerous gambit. Climbing would subject them to severe updrafts and wind shear, and descending through the eye wall would be like flying into a vertical wind tunnel. But it might allow them to avoid the lateral forces that were threatening CS-2187's structural Integrity. Beginning climb, Maya announced, tilting the helicopter's nose upward and increasing power. CS-2187 responded, beginning a steep ascent that pressed them back into their seats. The climb was nightmarish, violent updrafts alternating with sudden downdrafts that made the helicopter feel like it was riding a malfunctioning elevator. Twice they were nearly flipped by rotational winds that caught the rotor disc at dangerous angles, saved only by Maya's lightning-fast corrections and the mechanical backup systems that responded instantly to her inputs. At 15,000 feet, they broke through into a strange twilight zone, still within the Typhoon's influence but above the worst of the inner band. Below them, illuminated by near-constant lightning, they could see the circular structure of the storm, a massive spiral of energy and destruction centered around the calm eye. There, Santiago pointed. I can see the research vessel. Through a gap in the clouds, Maya caught a glimpse of the Horizon Explorer, a small white speck tossed among waves the size of office buildings, directly in the path of the advancing eye wall. Beginning descent, she announced, tilting CS-2187 into a steep dive that would bring them down through the relatively calmer air just inside the eye wall. The descent was even more challenging than the climb. As they dropped back into the storm's main structure, they entered a zone of extreme turbulence where wind currents collided and formed vortices that threatened to snatch control from even Maya's skilled hands. 2 miles to target, Santiago called out, his voice tight with concentration as he monitored their approach. Horizon Explorer reports they've abandoned the lower decks. All personnel are gathered on the main deck, ready for extraction. Through the rain-lashed windshield, Maya could now clearly see the research vessel, a 120-foot platform designed for oceanographic studies, never intended to withstand the fury of a Category 5 typhoon. It pitched violently in the massive swells, each wave threatening to capsize it entirely. Horizon Explorer, this is CS-2187 on final approach, Maya transmitted. We'll hover above your main deck. Prepare for immediate evacuation. Highest priority personnel first. Copy that, CS-2187. We're ready, and thank you for coming for us. Maya brought CS-2187 into position above the research vessel, fighting to maintain a stable hover as typhoon force winds battered the helicopter from all directions. The challenge was immense. The ship itself was moving unpredictably, rising and falling with the waves while simultaneously pitching and rolling. Deploying rescue harness, Santiago announced, activating the specialized equipment that would allow them to extract the scientists and crew one by one. What followed was the most demanding 30 minutes of Maya's flying career. Holding CS-2187 in position required her complete concentration, every muscle tense as she made continuous adjustments to counter the storm's assault. Each time a scientist was winched aboard, the helicopter's balance shifted, requiring fresh calculations and adjustments. 15 evacuees secure, Santiago reported after what seemed like an eternity, 7 remaining on deck. Maya nodded, not daring to speak and break her concentration. Her arms burned with fatigue, but she kept CS-2187 steady, refusing to give the storm the slightest advantage. 17 aboard, 19, 20. A massive wave, larger than any before it, struck the Horizon Explorer broadside, tilting the vessel almost to the point of capsize. The 2 remaining crew members, the captain and first officer, clung to the railing as water washed over the deck. We need to descend, Maya decided, already adjusting their position. We can't reach them with the current setup. She brought CS-2187 lower, dangerously close to the pitching deck and the waves that threatened to engulf it. The risk was enormous. A sudden wave or gust could drive them into the vessel or the sea, but she saw no alternative. Deploying direct rescue harness, Santiago announced, sending down a different type of equipment designed for immediate extraction. The ship's captain secured his first officer to the harness, waiting until she was safely being winched up before attaching himself. As he was lifted from the deck, a final massive wave struck the Horizon Explorer, rolling it completely onto its side. Had they been moments later, he would have been lost. All personnel secure, Santiago confirmed as the captain was pulled safely into the cabin. 22 souls aboard. Maya allowed herself a momentary sense of relief, but they were far from safe. The Typhoon still raged around them, and now CS-2187 was carrying far more weight than planned for such extreme conditions. Beginning extraction from the Typhoon, she announced, banking the helicopter away from the stricken research vessel, which was now clearly sinking beneath the massive waves. The journey out proved even more challenging than the approach. The extra weight made CS-2187 less responsive, and Maya had to calculate each maneuver with the precision of a mathematician, finding the narrow path between opposing forces that would allow them to make progress without being torn apart. They couldn't climb back over the inner band, not with the additional weight. Instead, Maya had to navigate through it, finding small weaknesses in the storm structure, pathways that existed for mere moments before closing again. Twice, warning alarms blared as critical systems approached failure. Each time, Maya adjusted their course and speed, nursing CS-2187 through conditions it had never been designed to endure, even with its modifications. After an hour that felt like a lifetime, they finally broke through the Typhoon's outer bands into air that was merely turbulent rather than catastrophic. In the cabin behind them, the rescued scientists and crew began to applaud, the sound quickly building to a roar of gratitude and relief. "Jefferson Control, this is CS-2187, Maya transmitted, her voice hoarse with fatigue. "Mission accomplished. 22 survivors secured, returning to carrier." The response came immediately, barely containing emotion. "Copy that, CS-2187. You just did the impossible, again." As they approached the carrier, Maya could see that the flight deck was crowded with personnel, not just the standard recovery crew, but officers and sailors who had come to witness the return of a helicopter and pilot that had once again defied what everyone thought possible. CS-2187 settled onto the deck with the last of its strength. Systems that had been pushed beyond their limits finally allowed to rest. As Maya completed the shutdown sequence, she noticed that several warning indicators remained illuminated. Systems that would require extensive maintenance before the helicopter could fly again. But it had done its job. It had carried 22 people out of certain death, guided by the hands of a pilot who understood its capabilities, because she had spent years ensuring they would be there when needed most. As Maya removed her helmet and prepared to exit the cockpit, Santiago placed a hand briefly on her shoulder. "Chief," he said quietly, "I've flown with the best pilots in the Navy. What you just did, there isn't even a category for it." Maya nodded her thanks too, exhausted for words. As she climbed down from the cockpit onto the flight deck, the crowd of sailors parted, creating a path for her. At the end of that path stood Captain Harrison, his expression a mixture of awe and profound respect. "Chief Patel," he said as she approached, "the Secretary of the Navy is on the line. He'd like a word with the pilot who just rewrote the laws of aviation." Maya straightened despite her fatigue. "Tell him I'll call back after I've checked on my helicopter, sir. CS-2187 is going to need some serious maintenance after what I just put it through." Harrison's face broke into an unexpected smile. "You?" "No, that's exactly what he said you'd say. She want to check her aircraft first. I think you've made quite an impression." As the medical team began helping the rescued scientists and crew, Maya turned back towards CS-2187. The helicopter sat on the deck, rain-washed and battle-worn, systems cooling with soft pings and creaks that only a maintenance chief would recognize as the sound of a job well done. What had begun 6 months ago with the Meridian Star rescue had now been confirmed beyond any doubt. The maintenance chief everyone had dismissed as support staff had once again proven herself to be something extraordinary. A pilot who could fly through conditions that grounded everyone else, who could reach those deemed unreachable, who could save lives when all hope seemed lost. And CS-2187, the helicopter that had been mocked as obsolete, had once again demonstrated its unique value, not despite its age and modifications, but because of them. In the hands of a pilot who truly understood its capabilities, it had accomplished what no other aircraft could have done. Together, they had not just completed a mission, they had redefined what was possible. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.